They go through their lives and they're invisible at work and they're invisible on social media and they're invisible in the grocery store, and like we're all disconnected.
How many of us feel not seen and not heard? Wouldn't you like to know firsthand what it's like to grow and transform, thereby creating change and becoming more fulfilled and successful? I'm Terry Yoffe, and welcome. These podcasts are an integral part of the Try Coaching brand, which delivers the same message as my coaching platform. As a 3-time international executive business and communications coach and coaching for over 20 years, I offer my clients my 60 years of business experience in both corporate and entrepreneurial ventures, as well as life lessons and the wisdom that I have learned along the way. Meet Jennifer Gardner, a Los Angeles-based persuasive communications consultant and trial attorney. Through her Art of Influence and Power Labs, she educates high-performing leaders on how to grow their influence, impact, and executive presence by focusing on the importance of seeing and listening to others, which leads to deep connections, and which she believes are the keys to the kingdom on what it takes to be influential and kick-ass leaders. Welcome, Jennifer Gardner, trial lawyer from Los Angeles, who is really creating change with her Art of Influence and her Power Lab programs, which we will get to in depth during our conversation.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are.
I would say that where I am right now is I'm really crafting the next chapter of my professional life and how I help people, how I help lawyers and executives, aspiring leaders, make the impact that they want to make in the world. And how I do that is by showing them with science-based principles and ideas how they can communicate more effectively in order to have the impact that they want to have. So that's where here is. It started with practicing law as a trial lawyer, being very, very unhappy in my initial law firm experiences. It was back in the late 1980s. And then I decided, the heck with that, I'm going to start my own law firm. And I really, in hindsight, wish I had stuck it out a little bit longer, because when I was in these law firms, there was more training and more experience to be had, but I was having a bad experience. I was being subjected to a lot of harassment, and I really wasn't getting the training. And in fact, what I got was some really negative messaging, which was women lawyers are crazy, therefore you must be crazy, and you're not a legal genius. And you never will be one because you're never going to work the amount that it's going to take you to become one, which was like 15-hour days every day and every weekend. And they were right. If that's how you measured legal genius, I was not ever going to become one because I was craving real world experience. And I felt like being cordoned off in a library and stacks of musty books was, with no windows, was not really the way to be a great lawyer. So I started my own practice, and I quickly got all the cases that no sane lawyer would take because nothing else was coming my way. And this was before there was internet marketing, okay? It was either like Yellow Pages advertisements or word of mouth referrals. And so I took those cases because I was hungry, and I was very excited because my clients wanted to go to trial. But then as I was getting ready for trial, especially in my first one, I realized I have no idea how to try a case. But I took it on, and I took many on, and I kept, to my surprise and the surprise of many other people, I kept winning my cases. And when I look back, and even in the moment when I realized what I was doing was I was telling very compelling stories, and I was connecting on a really deep level with my clients. and with everybody involved in that case, whether it was the opposing party, the opposing lawyer, the jurors, the judge, the clerk in the courtroom, absolutely everybody. And that's how I won many, many times, over and over and over again. And so you might say what I've done is I've perfected that. And I decided after many years of doing that I wanted to go deeper into studying what it was I was doing. And it turns out that instinctively I was doing a lot of things really, really right. So I've gone to school to learn exactly what that was at a very deep level. And now I'm showing other people how they can do the same thing in their businesses, in their law practices, in their cases, and in life.
I love the word connections because even in life, everywhere, it's about connections. I was in sales for many, many years, and I did really well because I made connections. I'd go in, I'd see them in their office, and I'd look at what was there that I could pick up on. It was a kid, it was skiing, it was this. And you immediately start a relationship with people. It's about connections and having people, I think, feel heard
and seen and understood. It's the biggest aphrodisiac because nobody's listening to us, really, when you think about it. I mean, the average human, the ones that I know, they feel like they go through their lives and they're invisible at work and they're invisible on social media and they're invisible in the grocery store, and like we're all disconnected. And so when you can connect, it's incredibly powerful. And the connection is an emotional one.
Talk about your philosophy, your neuroscience, in-depth sense of life, if you will, and then how you relate all of that back to lawyering.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I've always been entrepreneurial. And because I've had my own firm, I've had to learn how to promote that firm. And one of the things that I've also been is an early adopter of technology. And when you're doing marketing on the internet, you have to understand how to create a message that's going to resonate and be heard and actually result in leads and clients and money in the door, right? So while I was studying that, I studied with direct response advertisers, or marketers rather, and conventional legacy media advertisers. And I had a huge epiphany, which was these people understand how to persuade better than any lawyer I'd ever met. And so that just led me further and further down this rabbit hole of understanding what exactly is it that they're doing. I come to find out that there is all of this science that's being done to research exactly that. And unless you're in some very fancy business school or you're studying cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, neurobiology, neuroscience, organizational psychology, you're not getting any of that information. But this is what's happening behind the scenes. When I found out that there's actually scientific data to confirm what I've known instinctively my whole life, I couldn't control my passion or my excitement for the topic. So I'm one of these weird people who actually, in their spare time, does queries on Google Scholar and actually reads the articles. So that's me. So I've literally studied the neuroscience. I just completed a program at Wharton in the business school. Wharton is a business school on neuroscience and understanding the brain and using science for better results in business. And all I can say is, wow, I drank the Kool-Aid. I am just doubling down and doing more and more of this because I think that when more and more people understand the science behind what it takes to connect deeply, they're going, in order to have their message really be heard and understood and resonate, it removes a lot of the mystery. And it's just going to move us further in our evolution as a species, quite frankly. I feel like it's really necessary for more and more people to understand that what they're feeling is really the keys to the kingdom. And let me elaborate on that. In order to understand what other people are feeling, you have to first be tuned into yourself. Okay. It requires a level of self-awareness. And sadly, what's happening technologically in our world is making that more and more difficult, but more and more necessary. So we have to start tuning into ourselves so that we can then understand what other people are feeling. and find the common ground there. And from that place, craft the message that's ultimately going to persuade and help you get whatever result it is. Now, the results can be many different kinds of results. It can be winning a case, right? It could be persuading a judge. It could be negotiating for your client. It could be motivating your team. It could be inspiring innovation. It's all the things that any of us in the working world need to understand in order to not just survive, but thrive.
It's so wonderful, really, that I think it's in any profession, it's about understanding yourself and then going out in the world and figuring out how to get a sale, how to win a case, how to get a job. You know, it can be taken everywhere. So how do you apply all of this to the world of being a lawyer, negotiating, winning, especially in trial law?
In trial law, you're positioning and you're negotiating from the get-go, like out of the box. You are doing that. You're creating perceptions and you are developing a narrative of your position. And that starts in the very, very beginning, like day one. Actually, day one for me is the first call from the client. In order to do that powerfully, you need to understand not just the law, not just the data of what happened, but the emotional dynamics. And then you need to take that emotion, extract it, and use it strategically in your negotiations and in your presentations and your written and spoken communications.
Do you think having that skill and mindset gives you an edge in winning a case?
1000%. And not only does it give you an edge, but as the lawyer, gives you confidence and a sense of an understanding of what is happening here. And when you can manage your own stress in your own practice, you're going to perform better for a number of reasons that are really super obvious. But you're going to be bolder. You're going to take the steps that are necessary, which it takes a high or a high tolerance for risk. You have to be predisposed to wanting to make somewhat risky decisions. And when we do that, that's when we really start to move the needle. Now, I'm not saying being reckless. I'm talking about informed, well-reasoned decisions. But if you come to the practice of law from a fear-based mentality, they're going to eat you alive. So if you understand emotions and how to use it strategically, you are heads and tails above everybody else. You have insight into what the dynamics are that are actually unfolding, and you have a chance to be able to work with that more effectively, work with that dynamic more effectively.
You do this Power Lab. Tell us a little bit about how that can improve lawyers' ability to try cases and win.
There are so many, and you're a coach, so you understand this probably even better than I do, because I don't have a coaching certification and I don't have a degree in psychology, but I do know what I know about people. And I do know what I know about people who are in leadership positions, which is they're afraid just like you and I. And there's fear that you have to learn how to regulate and manage and control in order to be effective at what you do. I don't care who you are. There's always going to be fear unless you're a sociopath or psychopath, completely cut off from that emotion. The fear is the fear of being visible, of being disliked, of making a mistake, of not looking competent. These are fears that everybody has. And the more that we can recognize them and alchemize them, the better we do. And it's super powerful to do that in a room, often virtual, sometimes in person, of people who have the same struggles and are working towards the same goal for themselves personally. That's what we do in the Power Lab. We talk about our experiences dealing with difficult situations, because when we are communicating in high stakes, high consequence situations, there are all kinds of neurological and biological sensations and forces that are happening in our bodies. And we have to learn how to manage that, to overcome them, to keep composed to regulate our emotions so that we can perform at our best.
Stay tuned to hear thought-provoking coaching tips. Jennifer has a lot more to share. And here's a short word from our sponsor, Try Coaching. Who's in control of your life? Your circumstances, opinion of others, or even your limiting beliefs and old habits? We often don't even see what we're doing, as we've done it for so long. Now might be the time to take back your control or power and start charting your own path to success and winning. My superpower is helping people like you to see where you are giving up your power. Please reach out and let's start a conversation so that you can begin to call the shots in your own life. I would imagine that being a trial lawyer and all eyes on you, whether it's, you and the opposing counsel, and you're defending your client and whatever the situation is, you're really standing up there metaphorically almost naked. And I would imagine one of the things one has to start to overcome is, what you talked about, but add vulnerability.
1,000%. Absolutely.
Because that can really derail somebody, the opposing counsel or any lawyer up there, if they walk into a room with what I like to call the imposter syndrome and vulnerability. Pretty hard for them to come back to what they're actually there for and how to win, because you're there to win, period.
Yeah, you're there to win.
How does all this play with your Power Lab and talking to people? I know you wrote this down and I loved it. You have a workshop, whoever tells the best story wins. How you can have bad facts and bad law and still win your case. You wonder sometimes, well, how did they win? There was no reason for that lawyer to have won, yet they did.
Isn't this fascinating? It has so much to do with how the lawyer wove a cohesive message, how the lawyer connected with the jurors, how they appeared in the courtroom, their demeanor, their eye contact is so powerful, Terry. It's like the number one thing that drives connection. It's like, I've heard it said that eyes are two little pieces of brain on the outside of our head and the windows to the soul. And eye contact is so incredibly important. Body language, gesturing, word choice, and then a new area of focus for me as far as my scientific research goes is this concept of inner brain synchrony, and how when we are feeling things, if we are in sync with the other human or the humans that we're trying to communicate, how we can get them to feel the same thing that we're feeling, which is really basically empathy on steroids. And this is things that the most talented speakers and politicians and lawyers are doing all the time. They're doing it naturally, and that's what makes them great. And I want to deconstruct that and bring that knowledge to people who maybe assume, oh, I'll never be that good. I'm just not charismatic or magnetic. I have a message in my heart, but I'm afraid to express it. I'm afraid of speaking out. It's a harsh world out there, right? It's a rough world. And we have to have broad shoulders if we're going to be able to make the progress that we want to make for our lives and in our communities. And how else are we going to do that unless we understand what the ingredients are? It's not a mystery. So, well, it is until you know what the answers are. And I'm determined to finding those out. So to answer your question, yes, you can tell a great story and you can have bad law and you can have bad facts and you can still win if you understand how to weave a really super compelling narrative and connect. Like on a brain, vibes are real, okay? I'm here to tell you vibes are real. They are scientifically documented. If you can connect with the other humans on an emotional level by tapping into the emotional content of your message and your case, you can win. You will win. You'll win handsomely, in fact.
It seems that every trial lawyer that I do know they're tough and they have a lot of hubris and they walk around like they're the greatest thing in the world.
I'm an exception to that rule. I'm totally humbled by the experience of being in a courtroom and the hubris. I have hubris when I need to have my righteous indignation, but the rest of the time, that is not me. And I'm called a lot of things by my opponents because they don't understand why what I'm doing is working, because they can feel it too.
When a jury has to decide a case, when they have to make a decision as to guilty, not guilty, winning, not winning, what do you think goes into that?
Great question. Well, I think it depends on the case. It depends on the situation. There are a lot of dynamics that are involved. There are group dynamics. There's also the connection that the lawyers were able to create with the jurors during the trial. Group dynamics is a huge one. I can't understate what happens in that room is always fascinating. And that's why I always like to ask my jurors after a case, what was going on in there? What did you decide? Why did you decide the way you decided? There's all kinds of psychological dynamics that are happening in those moments. Let me tell you something really quick. I'm going to botch this quote, but I studied with an advertiser, a legacy media advertiser who's sort of legendary. I went to a conference that he had in Austin, Texas. And one of the things he taught me years ago was that the data is important, right? Now, in my case as a lawyer, that the data would be the facts, things that happened, and the law that you have to apply those facts to, right? But that emotion is what tips the decision-making process in every case. And that's how he creates powerful advertising. And he's made a lot of people very rich as a result of that knowledge. And that's my experience. And that's the experience of many of my colleagues. It's all about the emotion. It's the emotion and the emotional content of things that's going to tip the scales every time. Every time.
And the connection.
Right. Because you connect through accessing the emotion and by, I would say, leaving a lot of that hubris at the door. Okay, so hubris can be important. Self-confidence is very important. Bullying is a strategic tactic. Depending on the power relations between the parties, it can be very effective. I recently read a study that said that when you are bullying to the other side, what it can do is stimulate what's called covert retaliation. So there are consequences. You abuse your power, you may not know it, but it's going to come back to bite you, ultimately. That's what the neuroscience research says anyway. Kind of fascinating, food for thought. When we think of the ways that this plays out in our culture, especially now, it's really, really interesting to contemplate these ideas, right?
When you work with people in your Power Lab and trainings, do you work with them on how they can be more effective, more influential, and really great, kick-ass lawyers?
Yes, I do. And one of the things we always end up spending a lot of time with is the self-regulation piece, because two things happen in my experience with the lawyers that I've worked with. They either freeze when they're in a high stakes, high consequence communication. They freeze because they can't control all the symptoms of their parasympathetic nervous system, right? The fight, the flight, the freeze, the elevated heart rate, the feeling like they can't catch their breath, feeling like they can't connect with their head despite all of the preparation that they've done. This is a huge, huge problem. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who can't control their anger. They're really triggered. And then there will be outbursts and they'll say things that end up being super counterproductive to the case, super counterproductive. So what we do is we work with that. And I teach them somatic techniques for managing the stress. And we look inside to see like what's motivating the anger. And just by being aware of the fact that a huge part of emotional intelligence is the ability to self-regulate is incredibly helpful. Like there are ideas and there's information that if people just knew would help them increase their performance like 100%. If you're worried about how to have a persuasive message or an influential message, right? What are the ingredients of that? How can you weave those ingredients into your situation? So it's like a twofold approach. It's understanding what's happening in your body, understanding what's happening in your heart, in your own head, right? And then understanding what it takes to overcome that. And then how to have an actual persuasive message or tell a story with a good narrative that's going to really take your decision maker on a journey, or how to employ emotions strategically in a negotiation or in a presentation. Like, how do we push the buttons that are going to help us here? And how do we come off ourselves? It's a lot. It's a lot. There's a lot of moving parts here, and we just dive in. And depending on the person, we may dive in a different place.
And are these Power Labs open to anybody, not just a lawyer, a thought leader? Do you get everyday people that want to really hone in on their skills?
I do. I've worked with lawyers mostly privately, but in the actual Power Lab, I've opened it to everybody. And I've had very fascinating people in there, but they're in certain categories. Like, for example, I've had a lot of nonprofit heads who have this passion that they're promoting. And yet there's this disconnect between the passion and articulating it in a way to get fundraising activities or in order to raise money. That's a lot, right? Or how do we message about what it is we're trying to accomplish in the world? I worked with a lot of lawyers, of course, and I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. So yes, I would say I take everybody.
Is this a Zoom or in person?
We've only done them over Zoom.
So you get people across the country.
Yeah, and the world.
So if somebody wanted to reach out to you to really inquire about these Power Labs and sessions, how might they do that?
It's super easy. I'm on LinkedIn at Jennifer B. Gardner. I'm on Instagram at I am Jennifer B. Gardner. And my website is jenniferbgardner.com. And in all of those places, they can leave me a message. There are contact forms on the website. They can reach out and contact me and connect with me directly. They can email me at jenniferbgardner@gmail.com. There's waiting lists so that they can join to be notified when I open up the doors, which I'm going to be again in the next quarter. So yes, absolutely. We'll have Power Labs. I have a new program called the Power Quotient, where IQ meets EQ for greater sway. Yeah. And then, of course, the storytelling course, which is available for purchase. Yes. And MCLE credits in California. So, which is really great.
What's one thing you can leave our audience with? I mean, you've said so much, but if you could pluck out one tidbit or one nugget, what would that be?
It's something that I discussed a lot, but I would drive this point home by saying, problems that we have to solve as a collective are really complex. And we need to listen to each other on an emotional level, not just in our heads, not just from a place of anger, but from an emotional level to understand what everybody's fears and struggles are in order to craft the solutions that we're going to need to craft in order to have more harmony, have more peace, have more prosperity, and just to move forward in a healthy way. It's really like the heart is really the way. It really is the way. Of course, we need to have our brains and we need to be able to solve complex problems. But if we don't slow down and listen to each other first and ourselves, it's never going to happen. So I would encourage people to not disregard what their hearts are telling them. That's really the keys to the kingdom, the emotions.
Being authentic, heart-centered, and listening are beautiful ways to end this amazing conversation. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here and telling us like it is. Really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness. It was my pleasure. You're so easy to talk to. You made it so easy for me to explain these ideas. It's a lot. I know it's a lot, but thank you for your platform and for your invitation and this opportunity. I really appreciate it, Terry.
Thank you. We just heard Jennifer's compelling and extraordinary conversation that has offered you thoughts on how listening and seeing others can become your superpower to deep human connections. Reviews encourage people to listen to my podcasts. If you loved what you heard, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. For related content on extraordinary work, please visit my website, trycoaching.com. Change your story, change your life. On my next episode, I talk about the stories we tell ourselves, some leading to successes. However, all too often, our stories lead to self-sabotage and not good enough to achieve our goals, thereby holding us back, both personally and professionally. If you or anyone you know can identify with this, you won't want to miss this episode.